Hi guys, my name is Liz. I know we've already been in class for a little while, so I just wanted to take some time to add a video to a lesson plan that I did in my class, and that focus on the TPT of teacher performance and engaging all students and supporting all students. This is huge for me because I'm in an SAI, and that's special academic instruction, which a lot of districts is RSP. At the specific district that I'm at, we refer to it as SAI. And I have SAI Core, which is language arts and reading, divided into two periods. And then I also have an SAI Math. This lesson was particular to Core. And I also have sixth, seventh, and eighth grade students in my class. So a lot of diversity, a lot of different abilities. I mean, it's as diverse as it can get, I believe. It's actually really challenging because I'm trying to address IEP goals. I'm trying to address different grade levels. I'm trying to address different disabilities in general. I have students that have autism. I have students that have emotional disturbance. I have students that are also English language learners on top of having a specific learning disability. So I always make a priority to look for some strategies and lessons that are engaging because middle school is really tough age. So I get sixth graders who are still really innocent and just coming in from elementary school. And then I have the eighth graders who are like almost high schoolers. They're the big kids on campus. They're the cooler kids. So it's challenging in that way, but I also feel that it's helped me so much as a teacher to be able to decipher all the things that I need to do for each and one of my students. And for this, I focus a lot on repetition. I always am repeating, repeating, repeating. I not only say it multiple times, but if it's a short story, I will read it, then we will listen to it. I will read it again. We will do a story frame on it. And I try to just do repetition as much as possible. I also check for understanding a lot. So this specific lesson that I am talking about is the students were expected to write a narrative writing. And for a lot of my students, that's challenging. It can be a really struggle for them, a really tough struggle for them. And I have to break it down. I have to do a lot of scaffolding. I have to do restating of questions. I have to make sure answers are all answered thoroughly. If there's citations for narratives, not a lot of that because it's personal narratives, but just a lot of information that they not only need to process, but then take out in their writing, and they have to include detail. So I always have slides. I'm big on slides. I am not huge on Google Classroom because after COVID, I feel kids just need a break from the technology. But our writing is on Google Classroom, and it's just because a lot of my kids require text to speech, set speech to text, and it just makes it a lot more accessible to them. I make sure that by doing slides, they have visuals. I make it very engaging. I offer a lot of opportunities for people to participate. And one of the things that I do a lot that maybe my students don't like so much is that I pick on students who are usually not the ones to participate. We all know we have the classes where, there's those kids that kind of carry our classes, and they raise their hand all the time and they always have great answers and they add so much to conversations. And then we have the kids who don't do that, that are so shy, even because of their disability, have a hard time expressing themselves. So I make sure that everyone is involved as a class. I call on people, and that's what I mean by pick on people. And I will then have them answer a question, but I always feed them a sentence starter or I restate the question for them and then have them input information for me. So in our personal narrative, I asked personal questions. I restated the question for them and then they answered, which was much easier for them. And yet they were still able to participate. They were able to add a little more to the classroom environment. And that's crucial, especially for those students that can't do that. And it's a really struggle for them. Again, I make sure that communication is clear, not only between the students and I, because I can repeat things. I can have a visual, I can provide graphic organizers as we did in this writing. But also, I like for the students to collaborate. My students are in desks, whiteboard desks, and there's two at a table, and I put them together. So there's four. And my classes are about 15 students each, which is a really large class for SAI in comparison to other classes on campus who are mostly 6 students. So that again is challenging. But when we're communicating and I say, okay, guys, think, pair, share. Or I say, okay, guys, share with your groups. Give ideas. Give me a personal experience that you would want to put into this writing. Anything, oh, we read a story. This was a personal narrative. Can you think of a time? And then I make sure that when they're communicating, I also am there to provide the support so that they're able to communicate with one another and that it's clear. Not only are they providing support for one another, they're giving each other suggestions, they're making sure, and then sometimes it's like, oh, I said, oh my gosh, Ian, did you think of that? Oh no, that's a wonderful idea. Can you repeat that for him? A lot of that dialogue, and it's so engaging for the students, and I feel that they're also enjoying it. It creates this environment where people are just learning together, where they're able to process things nicely because there's people with the same difficulties and they're like, oh, what about this? And then you start thinking, wow, that's a great idea. So I love that strategy, and collaboration is important, but also having clear communication when they're talking and walking around and making sure, oh, do you know what he meant by that? Oh, you didn't know. Okay, so let's think about how we can describe this, or let's talk about how we can talk about this personal experience that we will perhaps be writing about. And I help them a lot in that way, and I think that's really good for them. And it's a great way to enhance and engage them. Um, and for this specific lesson, it was a personal narrative. So I wanted it to be about them. We read a story, and then, you know what? Look, I want you to tell me about you. So let's not create this really difficult writing where you have to do the citations and provide evidence. We do a lot of that in class, but I wanted this to be about them and how they can coincide their personal experience with the story that we read and how the same application is being derived. And then I also think it's essential, especially for some of my kids that are on the spectrum, to be very vigilant of nonverbal cues. A lot of the time, my kids are not engaged, or I can tell they're lost, but I ask them, hey, did you understand that? Oh, yeah, Mrs. C, I got it. Okay, let's apply it. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. What do you mean apply it? So I make it a point to pay attention to nonverbal cues a lot. Also, not only in the kids when they're processing their work and creating it, but when how engaged they are in their work. Because if you have a student that is having a difficult time engaging, they're not going to be able to provide that detail in their writing. They're not going to be able to create, they might not even be able to start. So being aware of the cues of, okay, where are we today? Where is my so and so student today? Are they having a difficult day? Let's see. Do you need a break? Oh, let me give you more support. Oh, here's our graphic organizer. Oh, let me restate the question for you. And hey, let me give you a couple suggestions. Let me write them on the board. Oh, okay, you got it today? Perfect. So a lot of that is important to me because I think a lot of the students get lost in the shuffle because we're only paying attention to the verbal aspect of communication. But a lot of our students are telling us so much more just through nonverbal communication. So that's huge for me. And that's also in my lesson. And I just think that as a teacher, you just have to be very vigilant of the fact that you have a lot of kids that learn differently. When I get people that are not usually in my class and they're like, oh, your students are much more behind the gen ed co-teach. And I'm like, yeah, because my students learn differently. And that's okay. And I always make sure to reiterate that with my students because that is such a big support for them. I tell them, okay, so you see your neighbor, they're done with their tests and they're getting up and they're going to turn it into Mrs. C and you're on number 2. And you know what? That is totally okay. We all learn differently. We all work at different speeds and there is nothing wrong with that. And I think that alone is a big and important support for them because it creates anxiety for a lot of my kiddos, thinking, oh, I'm not going to get this done. A lot of them have accommodations that give extra time anyway, but just having that relief and being able to focus on the assignment rather than how fast things are getting done. And yeah, my class is probably going at a much, much slower rate than I would say even I plan sometimes. I plan a lesson, say this lesson, it was 45 minutes, and it ended up being 2 periods. And you know what? I don't think it was a time management thing. I just don't push my kids when pushing them is going to derive their learning and their application as well as the way that they're processing things. I'd rather take 3 days on one lesson that was intended to be 45 minutes than push through and my students get nothing out of it. So those are some of the strategies that I apply to my lesson to enhance their performance, to make sure that they're engaged, to support my students, which is always so important because if you're not supporting your students and they're not engaged, they are not learning. So it's really important. And these are strategies that I implement, and I hope that it was helpful. Thank you.